G'day again, viewers. Just thought I'd like to introduce you to one of our main brands of air conditioning, being Mitsubishi Electric. I grew up on Mitsubishi as an apprentice 30 years ago, and so I'm very familiar with their products and evolution. I've been the guest of Mitsubishi overseas for a factory tour as well, which was quite amazing to see. World-class manufacturing. Probably like with solar panels, I'd call Mitsubishi absolutely a tier one and world leader manufacturer of air conditioning products. So just going through what I'd call just really the standard range of equipment that people would be most familiar with being what's called split systems, or the air conditioners up here, or what they're really called heat pumps because they're heating and cooling systems. So here this is a relatively typical condensing unit which lives outside, and this is what's either absorbing the heat from outside and then putting it inside to make us warm, or is absorbing heat from inside and then expelling it outside to actually keep us cool in the summer. So with Mitsubishi, these are their standard ranges. So this unit here is the smaller units. So this is 2.5, 3.5 and 5 kilowatts is the size in this format here. And then their larger ones here are 6 kilowatts, 7, 8 and 9 kilowatts, which is in the standard range. They also have all of these things here connect to the same outdoor unit. The outdoor unit doesn't mind what it gets connected to. They're basically everything inside's the same, but they're just configured to look differently. So these three coloured units here, Mitsubishi call their signature series. Obviously we've got red, white and black. These have a few extra features on them as well, whereas they've got a little sensor on the bottom and it can see if the room's unoccupied and so forth, where it will then not heat or cool the room as much if you set it to be that, and then if you come back into the room then it'll up the heating or cooling, so for energy savings. So we infrequently use these, but frequently do. It's quite some people these colour schemes really go with some types of houses. It's just having the white unit on the wall isn't the right look, and having those colours as an option actually works out quite well. Sometimes it does. Further along the wall here, we've got what we call Mitsubishi's Deluxe unit, which is just the Hamburg with a lot. It's got all extra little features and so forth on it. It's a little bit different shaped, a bit more curved rather than square. And then down the bottom here, we've got actually one of my favourite systems, which is called a console. This one's showing it sitting up off the ground, but we also typically normally sit them on the ground. And this is typically more like takes up a similar amount of room to like a hydronic panel in someone's room, and but it's going to give you heating and cooling as well. It has the ability to recess partly into the wall, so it can recess about 70 mil back into the wall to make it narrower. And the reason why especially for heating, that I really like these, they're terrific, is they draw the coldest air off the floor and then throw the air up over your head, and then what happens is that air cools down over the other side of the room and then it's drawn back across the floor again. So like a hydronic panel, when it's on a wall, the heat's going straight up to the roof, across the roof, and then falling down so slow, and then coming across the floor and then being drawn up through it like a chimney again. So we get the heat effect in the room, but you don't have the air movement. Well, these console units are giving us the same result, plus it's a cooler, whereas when we've got what we call a high wall unit like this, then we've in heating, we need to get that air off the ceiling. So if you're like myself, I don't like the draft of, when I'm cold and I'm looking to be warm, I don't like that air movement on me. It actually makes me feel cold. So my personal choice, if we're doing things with a heat pump, is actually I like this configuration here. For that, we can still get all the heating in the room and you're not getting that draft effect. Other ones we've got here above our heads, these are also quite tidy units, only sometimes use them domestically, often use them more commercially, and these are called cassette units. So, but if people they don't want anything on the walls and to be seen, and they don't want a console unit, that normally with a unit like this installed on the roof, most people, because your eyes aren't looking at things on the walls, they're pretty discreet. So Like with the wall splits I explained before, this smaller footprint is 2.5, 3.5 and 5 kilowatts, so small lounge room to bedrooms. But then they have a lot larger one here, which is, this one goes from 7 kilowatts then to 10, 12 and 14. So this is for really quite large areas. We more would use these in like halls or showrooms and commercially. These are also just, I think it's really clever actually. They've got the filters in the middle of them, and they've actually got a really clever mechanism that loads down. The filter can bring it down to us, so no one has to get up to it on a ladder to clean the filter. So we set the height of this for each site, because this can come down up to 4 metres before we program it to stop. So when it comes down, the filter just sits in the top here, and then we can take the filter out, give it a squirt with a hose outside to clean it, and then just give it a shake off, and then pop it back in, and then pop it back in, and then wind the thing back up. So like really clever, as I said, especially commercially. You can imagine if you've got a car showroom or something like that, for example, that where you might have vehicles and you need to bring a scissor lift in or something to get up to something really high, well, they can be clean. We've done a couple of wine storage rooms with these in them as well, whereas we've got a cellar with the wine bottles all on the walls, and we've painted these black, so the cellar might be a dark colour and the roof could be black, and we paint these black as well. So it's there, and we'll keep all the wine at typically 14 or 15 degrees, and then it's not sin. You've got all the walls for the wine and so forth as well. So they're also a favourite. We've also got other things we can do, obviously, with Mitsubishi. Again, all of these units run off just the same motor outside. It doesn't care the configuration inside. There's these cassettes are square. There's another one here that's like long and skinny to go in between timbers. There's a much more commercial one down the end here where it hangs down from the ceiling, called an under ceiling. And typically the ones that we're doing in lots of high-end homes now are what we call bulkhead units, where we'll have a tiny ducted system with a grill through the wall, often above the wardrobe. So you can see there's a couple of different grills up on the wall there, and we get those made to whatever length we need to. So that's a really, especially with double-storey homes now, we'll often get, when we've got a bit higher ceilings, get the architect or the builder to make the cupboards, let's say it's a 2.7 ceiling, and if they give us 300 mil above the wardrobes, we can put that unit actually up inside behind the wardrobe and just have a grill coming into a bedroom, and then the hot or cold air blows out of that. So then we don't have any wall splits or consoles or cassettes, and all this thing is just a grill, and each room has its own temperature control, be heat or cold. Every room can be its own temperature. So that's, especially with new homes, that's a really clever way. We've been doing lots of equipment lately. Welcome behind the stage. So from the this is the rear of the those grills I was showing you before, where I said that these units will often put in above a wardrobe or a cupboard. So this compact one here is quite commonly used now, whereas the cupboard typically is, say, 600 deep, and this is 400 deep, and this just goes in that void that gets made. So if you open the cupboard doors, you've still got a ceiling inside the cupboard, but that ceiling we typically get made so it can be unscrewed to get access to the unit if it ever needs maintenance and so forth in the future. This one here is showing the filter on the back, whereas sometimes what we do is the grill on the front. We'll often sometimes put either the filter in the grill on the front, or if we can put an access hatch in the cupboard, we'll put one in there as well. So that's just the rear side, and the last bit of the box here. This one here is actually what's called, it's a fresh air box. So Mitsubishi call it a Lossnay, Lossnay, and what happens is it brings fresh air in from outside and then blows it into the house, and at the same time it's taking air out of the house and blowing it outside. So let's say it's winter time, and what's happening is we're bringing cold air in from outside and blowing it into a house that's heated, and we're typically then going to take out warm air from inside and put it outside. So that's actually quite inefficient. We're trying to heat the house, and effectively we've got a window open. But what happens in this box here is the cold air and the warm air, so the cold air coming in and the warm air being exhausted, they go between each other in a fin system. So the air actually doesn't touch, but the actual the heat exchanger that the air runs through, it's like core flute that you make a core flute sign from. So and what happens is the heat of the air that's being exhausted is recovered back into the cold air that's coming in. So they recover up to about 70% of that energy. So if houses now can be really airtight, especially if they're headed towards passive houses, so having an amount of fresh air to come in to them can be important, and this is a way of actually bringing that fresh air in and then not losing, we're reducing the amount of energy that's lost. So any air that blows into the house, whatever blows in has to come out. So we're recovering the energy, whether it's hot energy or cold energy that's in that air, to keep in the house, yet still bringing in fresh air from outside. Another form of heating that we specialise in is hydronic. Panels on the walls are still one of the most common ways of having hydronic in your home. But if you've got the opportunity and the houses are new builds, then there's other ways that we can still do it. The traditional way in Australia that hydronic's done when it's done in the concrete slab is, you'll see there's a demonstration. We've got a bit of concrete down the bottom, and this is the rebar that makes the concrete strong, and you can see the plastic hydronic pipes, the cable tied to that, then the concrete gets laid over it. Beautiful when the concrete floor of someone's home's just warm, and we've got, again, that virtual no air movement. We've just got that tiny bit of heat rising up off the floor. Could have your socks or bare feet on, or just generally socks, and you're walking on that warm floor is really nice. So this is the most economical way to do it in the build. But the disadvantage of doing this is that the concrete always wants to be the same temperature as the ground temperature, and typically Melbourne's ground temperature is around about 16 degrees, give or take a degree or two, whether you're up in the hills or so forth. So you're heating the concrete slab, and it's a massive stone that's sitting on the ground, and the ground wants to make it the same temperature as the ground. So there's inefficiencies there with having something that's warm, let's say low 20s, 22 to 24 degrees, and sitting on a cold surface that's, say, 16. Whereas the clever way to do it, but it does add to the capital outlay, is we still have a structural concrete slab, so visualise this with no pipes in it. And then what happens is we put an insulated mat on top of it, and I call this Lego because it looks like blocks of Lego. It's quite clever. So underneath it, it's got 10 mil of styrene, and that gives us a thermal break against. So the structure that holds the house up is still in the ground and is what it is. Then we have a 10 mil a bit of compressed styrene under here, and that, as I said, gives us a break because it's not conductive. This Lego block just then gets attached to the concrete, and then we lay the hydronic pipes on the Lego block, and that just clicks in to those. It's really clever. And then it has a very small amount of concrete that goes above the top of that. So the advantages of doing this are that we're only heating a small amount of concrete, so the reaction time and the controllability is far greater because we're only using a small amount of concrete. And then because it's got that thermal break to the ground, we've got no losses into the ground. You can imagine in Europe or America or Canada or Japan, where you've got snow on the ground, that obviously the concrete then would want to go to 0 degrees or whatever the ground temperature is. And this is the only way that it's done anywhere that's got snow on the ground. This is just the standard way it's done. It's not even considered to put into the concrete structure. So probably because we typically don't have snow on the ground in Australia, just the extra capital outlay of doing this really cleverly often isn't in people's budgets, but when it's explained to people the difference between the two, if it fits in the budget over the life of the house, especially you'd probably need 10 heating seasons, I suppose, to recover the costs the extra capital outlay of having 2 layers of concrete and the extra bit of the Lego block. But that in time will make everyone's houses, when we're selling them in the future, will end up with energy ratings when we sell them. So houses that are really energy efficient will command I think a greater price when people go to sell them, because people aren't going to have to spend other money to more money to actually make them low energy users. So it's probably it's like the stainless steel hot water I was explaining before with the Sandon unit. There's no built-in obsolescence in that. It's there for a long time, and this is energy efficient for a long time as well. We have done also a couple where in construction too, where we've actually used these the metal deflector sheet and the same thing where it goes under the timber boards, like on a second story. Some things that can have a bearing on that are your floor coverings though. So if you had a hugely thick floor covering, then carpet and so forth over, that can slow down the heating effect through that. So knowing what the floor covering is going to be before considering this is actually an important part of understanding how effective that's actually going to be. Because if it's obviously the insulation above it's too great, then we can't get the heat effectively in those top areas. So that's just a consideration that needs to be understood if doing it this way here. But if what's going on top is timber, that'll come through the timber and quite okay. It's just underlay, and then carpet can be a challenge on that. Cheers.